Can everyone hear
You
me
guys.
okay?
Yes.
Okay. Shubhada is a dynamic and impact-driven senior technical leader with a distinguished career in the field of quality and reliability. She has received many awards, including the 2021 ASME Women Engineer Award and Intel Achievement Award, Intel's highest internal recognition. She has 9 patents in semiconductor technology and over 30 publications. With over 25 years of experience in the semiconductor domain, she has been instrumental in shaping industry-wide quality frameworks, advancing technological innovation, and spearheading initiatives to strengthen customer engagements. Welcome. And
When
our
it's
second
slide time,
speaker,
Jason, if I'm interrupting, sorry, just give me a
oh,
thumbs
don't
up
worry
or
about it.
whatnot, and then.
Yeah. Oh, let's go. Here we go. Shalab Tendon is a seasoned technical leader with expertise in microelectronics manufacturing, specializing in the quality and reliability of semiconductor products. He served as a senior director of Intel Corporation in various roles related to product and platform qualification. His career is defined by leading organizations through complex technical challenges with far-reaching implications for product functionality, quality, and security. Known for his ability to navigate ambiguity in high-pressure environments, Shalab is a trusted advisor to senior executives and technical fellows alike. Welcome to both of you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, would you like us to take over, or do you have other things you want to go over?
I'm going to go on mute, and then feel free to take over the slides
All
on
right.
the screen. And I'm going to go
yeah.
try to grab my AirPods and fix my audio.
All right. Let me attempt to share. Okay. It should be within seconds. You should be able to see my screen. And let me start sharing the presentation now.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. Let me do one more thing. See if I can unpin this. Perfect. Jason, thank you for the introduction. Brian, thank you for inviting us here and the introduction. Much appreciated. And I don't know if Subbu is in the audience, but a shout out to Subbu. He's the one who got us invited here and introduced us to this local chapter a while back. So thank you, Subbu. As you just introduced us, both Shubhada and I will be presenting to you for the next 45 or 60 minutes or so. If it's okay with the hosts, I'm perfectly comfortable entertaining questions during the presentation rather than holding. If that's okay with you, please do interrupt us for questions. If not, as he said, put them in the chat and we can certainly entertain them at the end. So with that, let me get started. And what Shubhada and I will do is walk through, I don't know, 25 or so slides with a narrative that revolves around why is it that we continue to have issues in the field. It doesn't matter what industry you belong to, whether it's pharmaceuticals, where device recalls and pharma recalls are common and expensive. I'm sure over the course of the last 5-10 years, you've heard of many recalls related to food industry, whether there is salmonella poisoning in eggs or salad material or spinach, happens a lot. Even in the semiconductor industry, there are, even to this day, whether it's software or hardware, there are issues for sure, if not total recalls, and they can be quite expensive. And so both Shubhad and I have worked at Intel, as was alluded to earlier, and we realized over the course of our journey there, which is almost 5 decades, that we were following towards the last 10-15 years, we were following a process that we have developed, not entirely inadvertently, but we had developed through experience without documenting it or realizing it. And the other thing we realized was that there is no reason for only big companies to have these processes that benefit issue resolution. Smaller companies can have it too, which is how we got onto this journey to provide the framework that can help build resilience, which is essentially documented in this book called Don't Panic, Pivot. And what I'll do what Shubhada and I'll do is I'll start out with a quote and a comment, and we commit to explaining this by the end of the presentation and the discussion. And it's don't just react to screams, but respond to whispers. And you will see naturally this will develop into a theme of what makes organizations resilient and why. And just so, at least at the general high-level sense, what is organizational resilience? Well, at the base, it's the capacity or an ability, whether it's an individual or an organization, doesn't matter. It is our capacity or ability to withstand disruptions, stress, and then adapt effectively and recover whatever it is that we were trying to do. In a company's case, preserve them long-term stability, maintain their business, maintain their brand image, maintain their production so customers are happy despite hiccups. In individuals, it may be you're a professional athlete and you've had a bad day or a bad season. How do you get back onto the court? And that has to do with your ability to be resilient. And that has to do with ability to handle small little as well as big little things that lead to challenges. So I'll start out with an image and I'll play a video. Can anyone unmute and then just say what that image on the right is, or perhaps on the left? I'll just play the video for convenience. Can anyone recall what this is, either through a chat or just audio comment?
It's an oil spill.
Exactly. So this was our 2010 BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. It was called the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig explosion. And I've cited, so whatever I present in the next two slides are from those two sources, so it's real. And the interesting thing about this spill was it was disastrous in multiple sense, right? It was an ecological disaster. It killed 11 human beings during the explosion. It cost BP $65 billion. And if you happen to have watched it, the initial response from BP, particularly as CEO, was abysmal, appalling, borderline almost corruption, where he said, why are we worried about such a thing? These were his words, or I'm paraphrasing. So that company just didn't realize that not only had they created a disaster, and I'll explain that why I'm claiming that in the next page or two, their response to a crisis, in this case a disaster, was just unprofessional and abysmal. It cost them $65 billion, and you can see the breakdown. Besides the 11 lives lost, which was very painful for the families, 4.9 million barrels of oil went into the water, about $21 billion in civil, criminal settlements, and so on and so forth. But you can imagine $65 billion is a lot of money, and it can solve a lot of problems. And so the next question is, and I'll tie this to the quote, could this issue or a scream have been prevented? And that's what it's a crisis, it's a scream. We know how to react to crises and screams. So here is just a snapshot of what the numerous investigations reveal. Failed negative pressure barrier test. Now, I won't go into the details because the purpose is not about the technical elements, but the point is what I'll go through is there were numerous signs that something was going wrong. There was anomalous pressure test results that were completely ignored. Pressure test of those BPOs or the blowout preventers, which prevent such a leak. Ignored gas migration indicators. There were hydrocarbons that were leaking slowly before it became a full-blown spill. They were ignored. Inadequate blowout preventer performance maintenance that were design and maintenance issues were identified. No one paid attention to it. Probably because of cost cutting and schedule pressures. And this is where leadership comes in, and Shubhada and I will refer to this towards the end. Weak safety culture and poor risk management. BP and partners had deficient safety systems, poor communications, and insufficient contingency. I will repeat, these are not my words. I have extracted this from the official. These were the official findings from various organizations that invented. And of course, a few others about faulty well cementing. All of these signs existed that BP ignored. BP and its partners, Halliburton and a few others, it just ignored. Not a big issue, we'll deal with it later, ignore it, it was just slightly off, this, that, and the other. And these are the small steps that we call whispers in our book. Had they listened to most of these things, these would have amounted to maybe 10, 20, $30 million worth of expenses and delays. Stretch it to 100 million. Nothing compared to 11 lives lost and 69 billions. So the point is, these are the kinds of signals we often miss by discounting them. So again, if I was in a classroom or even here, I'd ask, if you were the CEO or you were the engineer responsible for safety and reliability, what would you have done differently? Right? And you can, just for interactive discussion, feel free to write some answers in the chat room. The chat. But the point being, these are any one of these things or any sequence of these things could have prevented or given them an early indication that there was a disaster waiting to happen that could have been avoided. Changing the tone slightly, but there's a main point on this slide. Paying attention to simple issues is important because it helps you find your weak points in the chain. And if you resolve those weak points, your chain or your organization becomes more resilient. It becomes stronger. Here is a very recent example. This was 2024 March. I'm sure you guys heard about a ship that collided with a bridge and ended up doing tremendous damage. Forgive me, I can't remember how many people either lost lives or were injured, but it was a very serious matter. It damaged the bridge, certainly damaged the ship. The root cause analysis found that there was a tiny band of wire that was wrongly placed, which started a chain reaction. That wire, for some reason, got misplaced, which created a short or an open, I forget, which led to a blackout in the ship, which led to other sequence of events where a 4 to 5 minute blackout and inability to follow procedure led to a ship that couldn't be controlled, and it happened to be near a bridge, so it collided. And the point we're trying to make here is crises are rarely the product of a single failure or a single event. They are generally a culmination of a series of small steps that appear benign, but they are not, because their cumulative effect is a disaster or a catastrophe. And focusing on all of these types of issues, small as they may be, is what makes companies prevent these crises, make them stronger, make them resilient. Why? Because if you attend and solve every small issue, you ingrain in yourself or in the company a culture where these issues are not ignored. And I'll take one more example, and then we'll go into a bit of more detail about what is it that companies can do, common sense things to become more resilient. And this is a study from the life sciences industries. Again, we've cited the source here, Sparta Systems. It was a study where they were looking at the FDA reports and a few other reports related to pharmaceutical medical devices or biologics recall. And this was focused on approximately one fiscal year, 23 to 24. And there was some intermixing of surveys that they did of industrial professionals. I want to just put a caveat here that I'm taking this, Shubhada and I are taking this as an example to simply illustrate a point. We're not indicting the medical industry, and this is just one of several reports you can cite. So it's for illustrative purposes. But the first point is, when they did the study of the companies they interviewed, they found that about 81% of the companies may have had issues, but there wasn't a pattern of repeating issues or repeating recalls, which is a wonderful thing. Issues are inevitable. You will have them. The question is, how do you deal with them and how do you not repeat them? So thumbs up on the 81%. But there were 19% of the organizations that had repeat issues. Now, 19%, obviously, it's much lower than the larger whole pie, but still that's a substantial number. And the same study, the same report shows the medical devices between 23 and 24 did increase, and the recalls increased, and either from a recall event perspective or the number of units impacted increased. Now, this data by itself on the right is simply illustrative that we have recalls, but the difference in the 2 years is not that dramatic because it could be that the detections are better or there were just larger volumes sold. So even if the fraction was the same, the number of units returned was. So that in itself is not that, the numbers themselves are not important on this slide, but the point is that we continue to have, in this day and age, tons of devices, medical devices that have life and death implications recalled. What's more important is the price implication, the brand damage implication, the human life lost in some cases. So I've only chosen to share the cost part here. And the way to read this curve, since it's a single report, is McKinsey in this report found that if you were only looking at the pharmaceutical aspects, the issues range from 10 million to 100 million in recall. Now, those are not small numbers. They're relatively small relative to the revenues of these companies, but they're still a large number. And these are recalls that should be avoided or can be avoided. In one extreme case, they projected as much as 600 million related to a device recall. But more importantly, if you look at the cumulative effect of this industry in these years, was totaled about $5 billion worth of medical recalls. Now, again, this study didn't look at the human implications where there are patients who had to go through a rough time, either because something like a pacemaker, you have to go back, have a minor surgery, recalibrate the instruments at that age. So these are costs that are not necessarily indirect costs that are not necessarily baked into these kinds of things. But the point I'm making here with this data is the cost of resolving issues can be tremendous. And now in hindsight, I should have posted a graph here, which I'll sort of verbally try and explain is, if you're in high volume manufacturing, especially if you're a large company, chances are you want your products to reach multiple geographies and hundreds of millions of users. If you're in that domain, an issue that you find within your house before it's qualified during development on a relative basis may cost you $1. The minute it goes to your intermediate next supplier, and then you have to fix it or recall, it'll cost you about $10. The minute it goes to a OEM or a final producer who is integrating all of these into a machine, it'll cost them $100 to $1,000. Once it reaches the market and you have to fix it in the market, or if there's a major recall, it can be $1,000 to $1 million. So it's somewhere around a factor of 5 to 6 between you finding the issue in-house. Again, that's related to quality measures, screening measures, preventive measures, versus fixing an issue that's already out in the field. And the prudent thing to do here is, doesn't matter if you're a medium-sized company or a large company, any one of these recalls can be devastating. I gave you a BP example that almost didn't survive. There are numerous other examples that you can Google on your own, that there are companies that practically go bankrupt or have to go to private equity just to survive when they have these major recalls. And more importantly, if you are a company that you're trying to establish yourself and you have these repeated issues, not only does it do damage to your operational efficiency, it can have a tremendous impact on your brand image. Now, if you have no competition, then you can survive that brand damage. You can live with it because you're the only game in town. But if you have competition, pretty soon it can have effects that may be permanent. And so the larger question then becomes is, can these recalls be avoided? I mean, what is it about these recalls that completely pass our systems and screening, given how modern these systems have become? And as I mentioned, both again, Shubhada and I have learned that issues are inevitable. Why? Because we deal with complex things. It is not just about preventing issues, which is important. It is also what systems do you have in place, how disciplined you are with those systems in quickly discovering those issues, detecting them, and efficiently resolving them. More importantly, and this is critical that most companies miss, when you've resolved an issue, the game doesn't stop there. You have to learn from that issue, and the learnings have to be embedded into your system, very similar to what a quality management system will prescribe, so you can avoid repetition of that issue. And that's the journey that we'll go to in the next several slides. And the short answer is yes, companies can significantly reduce the probability of issues. They can become very efficient at resolving them if they follow a systematic critical issue management process, which is what SIM stands for in this. I'm going to pause here just for a moment. There's no personal information is being collected here. If you folks don't mind help us just take this survey quickly. Use your phone to use the QR code and just answer these 4 questions. And they're relevant to the discussion that we're about to have. I'll pause. Can someone either give a thumbs up or a hands up saying they can access the QR code and there's no issue, please?
Started seeing the responses.
Excellent, thank you. Since I can't see my other screen right now.
Yeah, and I'll give it a little bit time because we have about 57 attendees and
No
about
problem.
13 respondents. I'm going to wait until we have enough.
Yeah. And Shubhada, I can't see the chat on my window, so please stop me if there are questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm also looking at the chat, so if I see something else,
Thank you.
politely interfere and ask the question.
Wonderful.
We have number increasing shelves. I'm thinking people are still
30 more seconds?
connecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. We have time, so I'll wait.
Yeah, once everybody's in, then it'll go fast. I think the first one will be a little bit.
If you have a decent number, Shubhada, let me know and then I'll start.
Yep. I think that's what I was looking at. Yeah, we have about 22 responses. I think
Okay, good enough for a non-statistical, but a decent sample size. So, okay, thank you for those who have responded and others.
That was only first question, Shalab. So now I'm moving to the second question.
I will wait.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, we only were able to answer the one question so far.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, this should go fast now since everybody's in already connected.
So we answer one question, and then it says, please wait for the presenter to change slides. So, okay.
So Shubhada, you're doing that?
Yep, I'm doing that. I'm just waiting to make sure everybody logs in the answer, at least the ones who have. We have almost just 1 or 2 people remaining. Maybe give 10 seconds.
That's okay. We should have enough.
Yep, moving to the next question. All right, 1 more, 2 more.
Just to calibrate, are you on the 3rd one now or still second?
No, the after action reviews, and then we have 1 more to go. All right, and we have most of the responses. The next one. This is the word cloud one. And we'll share the results. I'll put all of them. Yeah, but let's give like 30 seconds. People are starting to write words. Almost there. Half of the people have responded, so it takes a while, I guess, on this one to think of. So 75% there. All right, we can move.
Thank you, and thanks to all those who responded. And as Shubhada said, we will she'll compile the results and we'll share them, tied to the larger message. So let me now that we've set the stage on crises, critical issues, cost implications, and potential avoidance methodologies, let's talk a little bit about what that methodology is. Now, there isn't a single one. I'm sure different companies follow different ones, but there is a larger framework that relies on common sense and past practices that have been successful, which can be institutionalized, which is essentially what we have done and we'll share. So let's start with, just so everyone's on the same page, we keep calling critical issue management. What is it? So issue, again, just using a common sense approach, issue is any unresolved event that either disrupts or hampers your normal operations. It could be as simple as a machine is down that may not have yet impacted the external customer, but it's impacting your operations in the line. Or it could be an event that, or a product that fails to meet the published and agreed upon specifications. Now, an example of this would be, all of us have been in a situation where we'll buy something moderately expensive or expensive. It functions, but it's not satisfying. It could be a slow functioning PC. It could be a device that shuts itself off but comes back on in 3 seconds, but it works again, but it's annoying as heck. So it's not meeting some expectation and published specification. That's also an issue in a manner of speaking. Now, if it has a time-sensitive impact, and it could be a financial impact, safety impact, performance impact, functional impact, and a few others I'm not thinking of, you will have to categorize as critical because it is impacting someone who's expecting something differently, and it could impact your bottom line. And finally, if it is not addressed urgently, it has the potential of becoming a crisis. And this is what we have learned. People don't realize, especially leaders, that simple, benign-looking issues have the potential to become a crisis if not properly understood. And I think I'll come to this towards the end, or Shubhada will come to this. If not, I'll at least state it. It is one thing to look at an issue which appears benign, study it, make an engineering or a leadership decision saying, yep, we have looked at it. Yep, it's impacting something, but we think we can manage it. Let's put it as a lower priority, solve it, if not, at least contain it, and then disposition it. As long as you follow a systematic process and deliberately disposition it, you have managed the issue. You may not have managed it in the most efficient manner, but you have managed it, as opposed to saying, it's too small, 0.5% yield problems, don't worry about it, we'll come back to it. And before you know that, 0.5% can become a 5% crisis. And that's essentially what the snowball effect concept is, that a seemingly unimportant problem can very quickly, especially in this day and age where you're manufacturing at a high volume and you want to reach millions of customers, those problems can snowball into a very large momentum gathering issue that can become difficult. And so one of the first tenets about preventing a crisis is it requires early detection of issues, signals, outliers, and then a systematic evaluation of that small issue. Like I said, you don't have to spend $1 billion or $1 million of resources solving every problem, but you have to give it some leadership attention and determine or make sure that a process is being followed that adheres to some standard basis, whether it's a quality management, Six Sigma, or the process we described called the 9-6 framework. That helps build resilience. And again, we'll continue down that line to show you. So then the question is, do most companies have a structured SIM process? And if not, why not? Shubhada, do we have the data or should we wait till later?
It's there, Shalabh. If hopefully your presentation refreshed, if not, just
which slide is it on?
Right after this one. Right after this one.
16 slide. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see it, so maybe I'll come back to it. Let me just give me a moment to refresh it. All right. Let's see if it refreshes it. Sorry, folks. Trying to do this real time. Hopefully it'll work. Okay. Here we go. All right. So the question is, Do most companies have structured SIM processes? And if not, why not? I'll come back to that. But here is the data that all of you helped provide. Shubhada, since I don't know what question is what, please help me. You go ahead since you just constructed it.
All right. The question is on the top, and we asked about, several aspects of issue management. One, we were asking if you're aware of any formal issue management. So seems like about 23 people were logged in, roughly. So a majority did on the top left said that they are aware of a formal. So that's amazing. That's awesome to hear. What problem solving techniques are you aware of? Looks like Five Eyes and Ishikawa is probably, those are more popular, and then AD and TRIZ. We probably in the open discussion, we could see, other, and I guess we should have explained MBPS a little bit. This is model-based problem solving. And if we have time, we can talk a little bit about that one. On the bottom is, do you engage in formal issue management process in your company to solve problem? And it seems like this is about 50-50%. So, some folks do have that and some not. So actually, this will be a good discussion to have here. And then lastly, what word comes to your mind? And this is always interesting to see how the word cloud looks like when you have the perspective of issue management in mind. And rightfully, probably one of the common or probably popular ones shows up is cumbersome. It is. Issue management is not straightforward, hence discipline is needed. Root cause, kappa, cause, problem solving, occurrence, traceability, investigation, troubleshoot, dependent, coordination, emergency planning. Great words here. And we hope that you will see in the subsequent files, most of these words pretty much are resonating with you.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, and I'll just make one comment. This is, does your company consistently complete after action reviews? And as is clear from the data, approximately 50% do not, or do it sometimes, I should say, not do not. Now, this is key because as will be clear in the next set of foils, issue management doesn't stop when you have helped the customer resolve the issue. If the company wants to become resilient and learn, it's important to learn from the mistake. And that means not only understanding the root cause, but understanding what documentation, what process, what muscle memory has to be strengthened or modified so we don't repeat that mistakes. And there, the sometimes answer does not bode well for companies. They might do some things well, but not everything well. And that can lead to problems. So with that, Shubhada, please go ahead. I'll hand this to you. And I'll chime in when I have a comment.
Perfect. Yes, please do chime in, Shalabh, as needed. So we're going to now talk about exactly what the process we wrote about in our book based on our experiences. Both Shalabh and I actually dealt with managing pretty complex issues for several years in our experience at Intel, and which is what we have kind of codified in some sense to make it more comprehensive. And that's what we wanted to share with you today. So Shalabh, set the stage in terms of what are some of the examples and why do we actually need it and where do we stand? And we are going to pick up now about how to do it. But one of the things we actually, both Shalabh and I, we like this golden circle concept, which was popularized by Simon Sinek, as a discipline structure to actually look at anything. And we wore this lens while we were thinking about formalizing critical issue management structure. The golden circle has three concentric circles: why, how, and what. So the why is really motivation on, why are you even doing it? And then the how of how do you go about doing what you do? And then last is what is that you deliver? What is the process that you follow to give what you have at hand? So what we have done is we have leveraged this to come up with 3 reasons, and we'll talk about it in the next slides, but we have 3 motivation reasons on why you need a critical issue management formalized process. We have the how ring through a 9-ingredient system, which is essentially a set of tools that you have in your hand to pretty much have the entire system completely sketched out. And then the last layer, what is essentially the 6 steps, which are ingredients, execution process. So think of it this way, right? If you are hungry, you're trying to make a meal, right? So the motivation is, I'm hungry, I would like to have something nice. The how is, okay, well, how do I make it? I need these 15 ingredients, right, to make it, or 5 ingredients to make it, right? So you essentially have what's needed. But then you have the what layer, which tells you what to do with these ingredients. How do you actually execute to get to a delicious meal? Any one of these that's missing is not a complete solution. You can have best of the ingredients, but you don't know how to actually go about executing and making the dish tasty, or with the right proportions. You're not going to enjoy the meal, and your why of the motivation of actually having a delicious dinner may not be met. So this is essentially at the core of what we are proposing in our 9.6 or 3.9.6. So this is our wheel, I guess, of critical issue management. First, 3 motivations. Why do you really need critical issue management? One, because it is the only way for us to drive operational efficiency, to make sure that the issues can be handled in a right way and the operations continue to execute as needed. Second is brand protection. You want to make sure that any issues which are inevitable, like Shalabh said, do not have any negative impact on your brand. Your customers, your stakeholders, your investors, everybody understand that you're going to run into issue. The grace is in terms of how you handle the issues and how you keep everybody informed so that your brand is protected. And then third is cost avoidance. If you do it systematically, you can see that you can actually avoid the cost. And the example that Shalabh shared about BP oil spill is a classic. Issues did happen. There was the blowout preventer, which was not looked at very carefully, and several of different whispers, as we call, that were present, and they would have all needed attention. If that was taken care of, you would have avoided an incredible amount of cost that you endured at the end of the crisis situation. So if you're taking actions right away and listening to those whispers, you will lead to cost avoidance in the long run. The next layer is 9 ingredients, and we will actually dive through individual, little bit in details in the next few foils so that we talk about it. These are essentially issue. How do you identify issue? Get the impact. What is that issue doing? How do you contain? How do you stop the bleeding? How do you understand what caused it? How do you have a comprehensive action plan to work on the issue? How do you execute? How do you go about implementing every aspect of the issue? How do you communicate to all the right stakeholders? How do you do after action review and learn from it and deploy the right preventive measures so that the repeat of the issues that Shalabh also alluded to in another example can be avoided? And then the last layer is this whole cooking part, right? So you have the ingredients. Now, how do you actually do it? And this is where actually all of you, most of the crowd is are ASQ members, and this is all of us have quality background. And this is near and dear to us, right? The whole ISO 9000, the whole systematic thinking in terms of, plan, do, check, act. We have expanded on it to actually have prep, plan, do, checked, respond, and feedback. And those are the 6 steps which go iteratively throughout the entire critical issue management cycle. So it's not like that's just one iteration of this. There are multiple cycles of these 6 executions across different aspects as you mix different ingredients together at different stages of critical issue management. And we'll talk about it a little bit. The last layer is very important. For us to effectively follow this wheel, of critical issue management, the 9-6 framework, there are other, resource structures that need to be available for you to effectively do it. Metadata, how much data is accessible to you right away so that you can holistically look at it. No issue. Most of the large companies or companies that span across geos, it is not contained on in a single site, on a single manufacturing line, a single customer, in a single geography. They are spread all over. How do you have access to all of the data to be able to make that call on impact or any containment quickly? And that metadata is very important to have all of the understanding. The team structure is important. We'll talk about it in a bit. Documentation, we keep talking about that in our book quite a bit because that's one thing which is actually not the best in terms of the task to do, but goes a long way when it comes to leveraging any of the learnings. And with now all of the AI bots, it's even easy to do this. Data systems to have the analytics in place. And then lastly, forums where you have the right experts coming in, the right customers, the right teams interact when needed to make decisions that are critical for critical issue management. So we'll walk through some of these details. So I wanted to just introduce the wheel and dive into the details. So let's talk a little bit about issue identification, which is usually the first, trigger point, right? This is about recognizing the issue. It is about acknowledging the issue that it exists, right? A lot of times, even that does not happen, and we have multiple examples of this. It's overlooked or it's not acknowledged in spite of observing it. So rather than glare and stare at the problem, acknowledge it, and then see what needs to be done. We need to understand all the details and understand the severity of the issue, right? In terms of, how impactful it is. Is it high? A lot of SIS companies have L1, L2, L3 scheme or, like high, medium, low severity or SEV 1, SEV 2, SEV 3, because that's important for you to classify because your reaction time in terms, or response time, I should say, not reaction, response time, really depends on how severe it is. So it's important initially to understand that. And then having a crisp problem statement. And this goes a long way. A lot of times, Shalab and I have actually seen where sometimes even a suspected cause is actually written as a part of problem statement. And that's something, where you've inadvertently acknowledged something which may not be the source. You have not come to that stage, right? So a bad design is leading to this. You don't know. Just look at the consequences. What are the facts? Stick to the facts. Look at the logs, the yield numbers or images or any metadata rather than opinions. And that's very key to establish a problem statement, not using any ambiguous language, right? Like sometimes it happens or this is happening a lot. That doesn't mean anything. Everything has to be quantified. And usually, if it's specific, it's measurable, then you have a good problem statement. And we talk quite a bit in our book about that one. And that goes a long way. In fact, we interviewed a few people. And one of the, the things that we heard from people who work in different industries is the problem statement. They say the most of the times when they're not able to resolve problem was when the problem statement was not correct. And I know we all acknowledge it, but it's very important that this particular one needs a lot of attention.
I've got a question from the chat I'd like to pose here, if that's okay now.
Please.
So one of the things that came up in the chat was sometimes the biggest problem that is experienced that people may not necessarily take ownership of the issue, maybe to protect their reputation or the fear of failure, and that may impact how well you get to that problem statement. So how do you get them to take action when they're kind of in that situation?
I can attempt, and Shalvi can add.
Go ahead. Go ahead, please. Yep.
A lot of it actually comes to the culture of the company and the leadership support to get people to bring up the issues when they do occur. If there is a system where the person who's bringing up the issues is actually penalized, then obviously you're going to hide all of these issues under the rug, and you're going to have crisis in the making. So it does come down to the culture. So you should reward discipline over drama, right? A lot of people come in the end and save and say, oh, there was a crisis and this team did great, and then you kind of reward the system versus people who are bringing up when it was just a whisper. So that culture has to be there. Go ahead, Shabala.
And I'll add to that. One is a psychological safety, which is absolutely essential, and that comes from leadership. Shubhada already mentioned that. Second way to avoid those things is create a system. It's an institutional approach to putting issues in the system. So if there is a system that everyone uses and everyone knows if there's an issue, you log it in, it becomes partially anonymous because you're following a process. You're not accusing anyone. You're following a process. And then the process, if there is one, takes care of itself. Now, even that can fail if the psychological safety issue value is not there. So good companies manage that very well. They don't blame the messenger. They reward people who solve problems and detect problems. Toyota is a perfect example for this, where they reward people for finding issues early. And we'll make a sort of an editorial comment on this at the end. This is why leadership plays a very important role in this wheel. They are the ones who make the outer wheel, as is shown here, happen, along with some values that Shubhada talked about. Back to you, Shubhada.
Thank you. A problem identified is a crisis averted. So I think that needs to be there everywhere in the company. All right, next page. Let's talk about impact assessment.
Sorry, it's taking. There you go.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So when we talk about impact, it actually has multiple dimensions, right? And a comprehensive impact goes a long way, right? You have to quantify. If you can't improve anything if you can't measure it, right? So impact assessment has to be quantified, whether it's like how many manufacturing lines are affected, how many lots are affected, how many units are affected, how many geographies, how many customers. There may be several ways of looking at it, right? Now, in terms of what domains the impact happens, we think these four domains comprehensively describe the impact. One is the operational impact, right, within the operations of the company, right? Whether you have a lines down situation or you can't one of your products is on hold and you can't you launch it if a particular software has a bug and you or your site is down, so on, right? That's immediately operational, and you need to quantify, and in our book we talk about different methods to quantify it. Second is financial impact, right? In terms of what damage that's already happened after identifying the issue, what's the financial impact, and because of some of the potential actions where you may have to contain, and we'll talk about it in a bit, what is the speculated financial impact, right? Understanding that gives you a perspective and also helps you in identifying the severity level that needs to be defined for an issue. Stakeholder impact, right? This could be soft and hard, different ways of looking at it. And a stakeholder is not just customer, right? You have internal stakeholders, you have investors, you have suppliers. So you have this entire ecosystem around you that is important for you to quantify the impact. So stakeholder impact is important. And the next one, Shalabh, I think if you can move to the right foil, I think you move back, is brand impact.
Sorry.
The brand impact essentially is a perceived aspect, right? So this may not, it may be perceived so that certain characteristics of the issue may have a impact on the buying decision for a customer, right? A brand could be viewed negatively, right? And how do you come around to make sure that in spite of the issue, you come out positive and protect that brand, right? And everywhere the quantification is very important, because data-driven decision is really key at every step of SIM. You can justify the why by quantifying these impacts. Containment. This is again tied to these 4 domains, operational, brand, financial, and stakeholder. You have to move fast to stop any further exposure because of the issue, right? You have to, maybe operational wise, if you have to hold the shipments or stop the line, or quarantine the inventory. Brand, you may have negative sentiment in the press, so you need to go off and manage that to tell people, hey, we understand, we acknowledge it, we apologize for this, we are working on a situation. In terms of financial, containment, also saying, hey, should we look at certain aspects in terms of reworking, or maybe scrapping is better in terms of financial decision making. That may be a way of looking at certain containment aspects. And then obviously stakeholder, make sure that the defective service, defective product does not reach more customers. How do you limit the shipment, or limit the procurement of any supply issue that you may have, right? So this really comes down to the typical disposition decisions that you make, whether you hold it, or you rework it, or you ship it as is, you scrap it. There's so many decisions that you typically make for non-conformance, and those have to become those decisions only can be sourced through a good acknowledgement of the problem and the impact assessment to make the right containment decision. The containment part is very important to make sure that you stop the bleeding right away, and you do not also at the same time over contain blindly, because it could be a costly affair. So the judgment here of understanding the impact is very key. So they go back and forth within that process.
I'll just add one more thing. This is where leadership comes in again, because if you're involved in a decision that could stop the line, which has financial implications, someone senior is going to be asking questions as to who stopped the line and why, if it impacts customer delivery or revenue. And this is where having a systematic decision-making process where an executive is involved in these kinds of issues, which we'll talk about in a minute, is key, because then everyone knows if the containment line has been stopped, it's because a system is being followed and a decision was made. You can question the decision, you cannot question the person who made the decision by themselves. So that is very important as well. Back to you, Shubhada.
Yep, exactly. Root cause analysis. This is the one we all know. Symptoms are what we observe on the surface, and the causes are deep somewhere, which is why the 5-eye drill of going deeper and deeper into the problem is very important. Because if the root cause is not known, you cannot fix it, right? You can mitigate it, you can patch it, but you will not be able to fix it. So this is where some of these methods like 5 eyes and so on are extremely important. It's very important for us to, label facts versus hypothesis and design tests to prove and disprove the hypothesis, so that you can actually pinpoint to the specific root cause and have the right data to support why you think this is the root cause. And once you have a root cause, you can drive proactive, long-lasting solutions. Otherwise, if you have mitigations, which sometimes is the case, sometimes the problems are so complex that you may not get to the root cause. And those are, in fact, suboptimal situations, but yes, but you have to keep coming back to it as you observe and get more data. So course correct. Action plan and implementation, the next point. These 2 ingredients really go about the systematic planning, right, and execution. How do you get the action plans, whether it's about containment together, whether it's communication, how do you acknowledge tasks and responsibilities, how do you allocate resources, how do you actually specifically execute the task and monitor the task, what kind of dashboards are absolutely important for us to understand where in the same process you are, so that you can make the right decisions about the next steps to take. And as much as possible, people talk about, critical issue management is about understanding impact, contain, root cause, kappa, and done, right? And maybe, preventive, there's maybe after action review. A lot of times this aspect of execution details is not explicitly mentioned. And that is what we wanted to make sure that we actually embed it as a part of our 9-6 framework, so that you keep a check on the approved actions, and you're not mixing ideas to explore versus approved action plan. So things happen systematically, so you don't overload one or two people who may be coming up with ideas, but an entire team who knows exactly what the plan is to execute against. Next one, communication. This is absolutely important because we have to have a single source of truth. And this is where what Shalab mentioned in terms of having a system, right? A ticketing system, or in any kind of a logging system is important, because that will tell you the single source of truth, which becomes the source of your communication. The communication needs to be timely so that you share as much real time, as possible, and transparent. Needs to be clear and crisp, no confusion, no maze and buts and so on, very unambiguous, and single voice. It should be, any team member should exactly bring in the same message. If you talk to two people, they should give you same answers. And it's very important in the critical issue management team structure to emphasize on this single voice. And we can't emphasize on this too much, because we have seen situations where bad communication, in spite of good problem solving, could completely ruin critical issue management. So right information needs to reach the right people at the right time, with single voice is the key. Let's touch base on,
just emphasizing this thing. Obviously, timely, clear, and crisp becomes obvious. Single voice, let's just emphasize, it doesn't mean, as you said, one person can speak about it. Multiple people who are informed can, but what they say has to be what's generally agreed to, whatever the state of the problem may be. A lot of times, communication, the old Chinese whisper expression is, you can't add your hypotheses, your speculations to what the root cause team has told you and then spread the word. That has lost a single voice, because that's what creates problems and confusion and misunderstanding. So that's the meaning of single voice here. Back to you.
After action review, this is one question we'd asked, and it seems like it was about 50-50%. This is an absolutely important point in critical issue management, and usually happens obviously at the end of any issue resolution process. So most of the team is tired, exhausted, are done with their tasks, and have little incentive to go after this very important part of the 9 ingredients. Because this is where you gather knowledge from all the teams who may have looked into the critical issue management, and we'll talk about the team structure. This is about technical technical information sharing, as well as businesses sharing, right? What worked, what didn't work, what can we do differently, what should we keep doing, what we did, and also include recognition as a part of this, so that people who may have left, or have deviated from their daily tasks to actually take charge of this, or maybe, above and beyond their daily job, they looking at this issue, get recognized for the work that they do. So we should not skip the AR because the issue wasn't that big, or we were too busy and so on. That shouldn't be, and culture should be such that it should be encouraged, and it should be celebrated with people recognized. And lastly, preventive measures, right? And I think this team is probably very much aware of CAPA, corrective actions, preventive measures. This is when you prevent the problem from occurring to begin with, right? This is a future oriented. This is about anticipating and eliminating not just the current problem at hand, but any issues that may be very similar. So if you do FMEAs, right, failure mode effect analysis, And if you look at different failure modes that are similar to the issue that you observed, and they may potentially show consequences, consequences that are similar to the issue that you observed, how do you actually go back and systematically put the preventive measure across entire family of such problems that could affect the operations, so that you can actually eliminate any of this snowball effect that could lead to a crisis? Now you're being very proactive in terms of anticipating issues, which is a big deal for critical issue management. So if you have an issue and it's related and you find it again after 6 months, that should be a ding, so that you look at the after action review process and your preventive measure. And this entire 9 ingredients go with this whole prep, plan, do, check, respond process, which you iterate, right? Sometimes you start with only definition and then you're doing impact assessment and containment. You haven't even started the root cause. That itself would require a prep, plan, do, check. Then you start doing root cause. Then you have this other plan, the wheel of the 6 steps coming in. So this is a wheel spinning on its own with different ingredients mixing at different point in time of critical issue management. Let's talk about the leadership and teams. Usually in any critical issue management, we recommend that, that there is one core team that's basically the lead of the team, and the right representatives, whether they are the internal stakeholders, representatives from the right stakeholders in the core team, that's supported by multiple sub-teams that report into the core team. Usually there are 3 teams that we see that help. One is a technical team, right? The tech team is the one that will typically is in charge of root cause, right? Or preventive measures. This is your technical core expertise. Then you have operations team that's looking at all the operational elements, right? Should I hold it, ship it, sort things out? Is the website down? How do we get it going? The operations team is looking at that. And then there is a communications team, because communication overall is such an important aspect in this entire critical issue management, because the core team, yes, is doing all the work, but this needs to reach all the affected parties in a timely manner, like we discussed, to make sure that the entire progress is being shared and the sentiment is that you are making progress towards a resolution. And that's very important to keep everyone pretty much up to date. And you can see, and we're not going to go through all of the details, but there are solid lines showing there some ingredients that have key ownership by these teams. But there are a lot of these dotted lines. So it's although they may exist in teams, their work is getting fed into different teams. And this happens through core team. And it's important to have a single system in place where this can happen, because this could, for complex issues, become very complicated. So it's important to have systems in place that will allow you to do this more effectively.
Hey, Shubhada, it's worth emphasizing in this, as bureaucratic as this may appear, this is important. The larger the issue, the more severe the issue, if it impacts millions of units or millions of dollars or millions of people or safety, the higher that severity, the larger the issue, the more senior the leader needs to be who manages a SIM-core team. And this is not about hierarchy in position. It has to do with the more severe the issue, the more urgent the need to make decisions is, the more ability he or she should have to make important decisions. This is not something where you can say, hey, there's a crisis happening, but I'll take it back to my senior lead and come back in a week. No, sometimes the decisions have to be made within a few hours. So the more senior the person is, the more ability he or she has to manage the resources, redirect the resources, make the decisions. So I think that becomes vital. And this is just a snapshot or one way. You can have, in some teams, you can have legals and financial members involved because there are implications of that nature. So it's a structure and the systematic approach to communication ins and outs that is important, and just the number of teams.
Great point there.
Yeah.
I'll just make one point. I know we are probably at 7:10, so we'll pause here. One thing I just want to point out here is that this entire structure needs to effectively and very efficiently move on, because the cost implications sometimes could be humongous for large companies. Like the Amazon outage that was there last year, they had quoted something around $10,000 per minute of outage time, which affected 17 million users. So it's quickly that you can actually form these, core expertise and target problem solving, the faster you get and lesser of the impact.
And which again, good point, which builds or ties this to the organization resilience. If you have to do this on the fly, doesn't matter how big your company is, you're bound to be inefficient and create tensions in teams. If you have a system that already has these structures in place, it's essentially snap of your fingers. 3 emails go out, 4 teams get formed. Why? Because there is an institutional memory, there's an institutional muscle, people know what they're doing. So this is why having systems in place lends itself to faster issue resolution, because people know their roles and responsibilities. And this is what makes companies resilient. How? Because if there's an issue, they know how to solve it quickly because the structures are already in place. Yeah, go ahead.
No, there's something that was stated in the chat, and I also want to echo it just out of personal experience. But, there's companies that do really well in the beginnings of those cycles, all the way through root cause and trying to find a problem solving for it. But when it does come to prevention and kind of waiting out the 3 to 6 months,
Yep.
they seem to lose steam, and maybe somebody's not is held accountable to making sure, hey, is it actually solving a long-term or a problem long-term? So it's usually like that prevention measure that seems to kind of fizzle out. So I don't know. They're not asking the question in the chat, but maybe I can ask the question of like, how do you agree with that, and
Yes.
do you have strategies to kind of help companies take that preventive measure as seriously
Yes.
as they do with the beginning parts?
First of all, very good point, very good observation. Shubhada, I'll start, please chime in.
Yeah, please.
And that is very typical of companies. Allow me to give you a longer answer. 1, issues will generally take time, so there is a fatigue element that builds in. 2, most people who end up being called to manage the issue, resolve the issue, are not the ones who created it, which means there's an opportunity cost involved, which means they have dropped their current project and are now being forced to resolve an issue because a customer has been impacted. 3rd, their schedules for the other program have not changed. The fatigue element, the opportunity cost element, usually starts making people, by the time, let me see if I can get to the wheel. By the time you get to this communication and after action review, they're saying, you know what, I've done my job, I'm moving on. This is where the core team comes in, and that's why the presence of an executive leader is very important, who says, no, we have a process, we will follow the process. We appreciate you, we appreciate the time. And something we didn't talk today, but it's mentioned in the book, is this is precisely why recognition is very important. Along the way, it is a team's leader's job to recognize people who are stepping above and beyond to help solve the problem, so they feel valued. And in doing so, they will take a bit more stress and say, you know what, we need to do this right. Why? Because they know leadership values their commitment. It's not a second job without any recognition. So all of those elements come to play from a leadership point of view that makes sure that the process doesn't stop at implementing and communication, but it finishes this process. So yeah, and we address that in the book as well. To you, Shubhada.
Yep, I'll add just one thing, and what Shalabh said absolutely is spot on, right? The leadership engagement, and that's the softer issue, which is very difficult, right? In terms of how do you actually measure it, and how do you build the culture? It obviously takes a right framework adoption and commitment by the leaders to get there. I would actually add another, which is more quantified, like going by the same statement I made earlier. You can't improve what you cannot measure. A lot of times the corrective actions would have impact assessment done in terms of, hey, if we don't correct this, this is what the implication is in terms of cost, right? Operational cost. We'll have so much inventory pending, and we'll lose this customer or so on. The preventive actions sometimes lack that shine or that rigor to have the same level of quantified impact assessment, and that needs to be very well put forward to the decision maker, saying if we don't implement these preventive measures, this is the cost implication, this is the brand implication, this is a customer we may lose, right? And these are scenarios that you potentially, but quantify them, because anything that you can measure or at least quantify, that will drive action, so that you will actually impose, at least you have some accountability there based on what you put.
And someone made a comment, Shubhada, on the chat, so let me repeat that. There are companies like automotive who follow the AD process. Part of that AD process is you have to demonstrate that the learning has been embedded into the institution somehow to prevent from happening. So that's the other way of preventing a team from simply buggering off before after action review. Hopefully we have answered the question.
Go ahead, Shala, you can.
Yeah, okay. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So again, this brings up to why we did title the talk, building organizational resilience through issue management. It starts, as we have mentioned a couple of times, it starts with a culture, and a culture that values psychological safety, problem solving, and learning from it. Now, a lot of people rightfully will say, you know what, Shabala and Shubhada, these are common sense things. And you're absolutely correct. These are common sense things. The value is not in recognizing that these steps exist. The value is in weaving these steps into a framework, into a stepped methodical process, which you are at first forced to follow. And then by practice, it becomes natural to follow because you build your muscle memory. And it is that shortcut process, which I've mentioned. The challenge is not that these steps are complex, rather that they are simple. And so people often discount simple things and take shortcuts. Avoid that temptation. It comes back to the other question about don't stop at communication or after action review. Go all the way to embedding the preventive measures and making sure someone has been held accountable to take the learnings and prevent the issue from happening again. And it all starts with leaders who role model, or they set the standard that discipline and structured problem is important. This framework, this approach, this commonsensical approach doesn't just apply to technical problems. It could be non-technical problems within the company where you can use and figure out why two organizations keep fighting and don't work together. The elements will be different. You won't have to worry about mathematical equations, but human behavior is also in some ways systematic. And this framework to some degree can help that. It starts with leaders who realize that problem solving is a muscle you develop. And the more you start with smaller issues, shorter issues, where people are simply learning, and develop that muscle where everything becomes, hey, I have to follow a process, not bureaucracy, but a process so that I can disposition it correctly, the better the organization is responding to larger issues. Why? Because then they don't panic. They have a system they can rely on. There's a trust based in the system because it works. Those are softer elements that you don't see upfront, but play a foundational role in making issues get resolved sooner. Shubhada and I forgot to mention one example of Johnson & Johnson. I don't know if you remember, some of you may remember I believe it was 1985 or somewhere in that, there was a huge crisis with Tylenol being poisoned with cyanide and people died. Now, long story short, it wasn't a Johnson & Johnson problem, at least it wasn't proven to be, because it was someone else who were tampering the product in the shelves of the stores, which led to cyanide poisoned deaths. However, Johnson & Johnson took a brilliant approach of putting their leadership up front with press and the media once they discovered, taking care of the problem at hand. Even though it wasn't theirs, they took care of it, and they developed, I forget, 2 or 3 new measures, which became preventive measures, tamper-proof caps. So someone can still break them, but you'll know someone is tampered with the tamper-proof cap. A foil seal that if the foil was open, you know not to buy that. Someone had tampered with it, throw it away or don't buy it. Johnson & Johnson did a fabulous job in managing that crisis. And initially they lost sales and lost money, but they came back stronger as a brand that cared about people and its customers. So there are ways in which leaders can step up in what is mentioned here and realize that every little issue has potential to become a crisis and create a system that is long lasting. So leaders play a big role in creating a culture where learning is valued, psychological safety is encouraged and tolerated, and transparency is of utmost value. And so we believe, at least from this point of view, apart from hiring good people, being honest, from an issue perspective, this is how you make organizations resilient. And again, going back to the definition of resilience, your ability to handle stress or issues without wavering from your long-term goals or simply managing your customers. So this brings up to the question we want to leave all of you is, again, if you're an ASQ, you understand quality, you understand management of quality. Excuse me. The question is, what company do you want to belong to? Right? And it's more of a rhetorical question in the sense, is your company an ad hoc responder where they have the talent, they have a reactive approach, they solve the problem, but more of an inconsistent approach with minimal structure? Or do you want to be a structured but inconsistent? Tools are in place, process exists, but people follow it only for big issues, but not every issue. So you lack execution, rigor, or consistency. Or do you represent a company which has a disciplined problem-solving ethos where everything is methodical execution, not necessarily time-consuming, but methodical? Not everything has to take a long time, but it should be done the right way so you learn from it. And companies that are on the right side, disciplined problem solvers, are more resilient. They can manage crises, they can withstand crises because they have a systematic effect. And by the way, this is not just a company element. This is a question we as individuals should be asking. What will I do differently in my job tomorrow so I make my companies go from left to right? So it's an individual thing that we all have to espouse the behaviors, hold ourselves accountable, and help the company develop a process where whispers are listened to and responded to, not just screams. I think that's the end of our presentation, Shubhada. Actually, I'm wrong. I'll hand this back to you, Shubhada.
I will just say one more thing about this. With a lot of structured approach that we have brought in, seeing the impact of it, we actually realize that it's very cumbersome. Like, I think that was actually one of the common words that came up in the word cloud. It is not easy to it's very easy to preach, or if you have a system, to explain the system, but to actually do it for every issue in and out, be disciplined. We acknowledge it is tough to do that. And that's why large companies have coach roles. There are coaches who actually pretty much their job is to help with managing critical issues. They will be there 100% looking at every element. But not everybody can afford to have coaches and then go through this. So we have an AI coach that we have developed, which is an agentic AI solution, Qurius AI, who is like a coach. It'll help you guide through the entire 9-6 framework. You have any issue, put in there, it'll follow through the entire process with you. So just connect your data, analyze your data, tell you what to do, what preventive measures are needed, which steps have been skipped, what has not been done, what is the impact. So it does the whole thing that we just discussed. And we are right now in a beta phase. So we are open for beta collaborations. If anyone's interested, please do ping us or write to us on LinkedIn, and we can definitely discuss. So we just wanted to throw in that little blurb there.
Thank you. Thank you, Shubhada. I think now that is the end. So we'll entertain any questions you might have. Jason, back to you.
Yes, thank you. Great presentation. Great information. I know I saw one comment, if those slides are available, because they are very thorough and detailed, if those slides are available, just let me know, and I can provide those slides if possible.
We will. You know what? We will provide the slides, but we also encourage, at least especially if it's an institutional request, the book is even more thorough. It'll do even a better job. But I think Shubhada and I will provide the slides.
And
Perfect.
I'll put the book link here as well in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My comment is, I think one of the things, like, as I've been in this field for a while, is going through that is knowing to make sure we ask all the right questions with the right people. And I saw that you guys are working on the AI, so I imagine, or I can think about, that AI might help you to make sure you've got everything considered. So even with all the data, you still need to be able to ask the right questions before you move on to your root cause analysis. Is that something AI will also help with, kind of making us think about the right questions to ask?
Yeah, I'll give a very short answer, and then I want Shubhada to chime in, because she is the principal architect of that tool. The multiple purpose AI, everyone's using AI, and it is very valuable. So that's the motivation. It's different from general purpose tools because it has been trained to do exactly what you said. It will help if you follow the tool, if you use the tool. It'll help you take a more systematic approach to answering these questions. It will help you solve the problem. It can't do it on your own because you're the expert in your field. You may have the data, it doesn't, but it will help you follow a process and help you avoid taking shortcuts, or remind you you're taking shortcuts, kind of an approach. Shubhada, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. One of the things, in fact, when you use our tool, you'll realize that it'll probe a lot of questions to you. If you give it an initial problem statement and say, this is the issue I'm handling, before it starts jumping into solutions, if you ask for a solution, give me an option, it'll probably give you something. But other than that, you will see that our tool actually probes exactly like you talk to an expert. Or if you hired us as consultants, we will not give you a solution. We will first ask you 15 questions to understand the problem, the characteristics of the problem, to even go to the next steps. And that's exactly how we have trained our tool to work, to get diligent about the responses. If you put the same question in ChatGPT or Gemini, you will see that it gives you a bunch of responses. It'll say, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could be maybe handle it. It gives a generic because it's not trained to do critical issue management. Our tool speaks critical issue management as a language. It's been trained to exactly probe questions the way a consultant or an expert or a mentor or a coach would do. So Jason, thanks for asking that question, because questions are essential in solving the problem. If you're not asking questions and if you're not being probed to ask the right questions, then you will not come to the solution.
Yeah, and the one thing to add to that, and I appreciate you covering that, is once you build a sound solution and the prevention measures are working, I think one thing I wanted to ask is, I don't know if AI or if you have other strategies for companies to maintain the solutions they have in case they come across a similar issue 2 or 3 years later. Why go through exactly everything when you may have a solution laid out for you that may work? So it's just like trying to keep a library of effective solution making as well, so you don't have to repeat all the steps necessarily over again.
And that's the power of AI, right, Jason? That's the pattern recognition, and it does it so well than any of us could do. And that's what we are leveraging as well. So we actually have a ticketing system that comes with our tool. So it will actually, any issue that you have is registered or saved with every context that you have given about the issue. The next time you have an issue, and if you have remotely connected to something similar, it is intelligent enough to tell you that this is a repeat or a similar issue may work from what has worked in the past.
Wow, very nice.
I'll just add one more thing to that. It's the same concept of institutional memory. If someone uses tool A today and 6 years later they revise the tool or move away, you might lose the tool memory. As Shubhada pointed out, it may be in this ticketing system, but if the tools change because the company changed it, you will lose it. So the tool will maintain it and help you probe, hey, you saw this issue, here are the symptoms, this is what you did last time. that is necessary but insufficient. You also need to tie that into your institutional, so the other memory of your institution. So let's just say, for discussion's sake, it's a semiconductor design problem. The tool will be a repository, but that learning needs to go into the design team and memory so they can change whatever documentation they need to modify based on the learning. So both work in parallel. Because as we all know, tools change over time and you don't want to lose that memory through tools. So if you change it at the root, then at least the error will not be propagated further. But this tool will certainly help to that.
Yeah, and people change all the time, and so a lot of institutional knowledge goes out the window. So having a set of new individuals, but with a tool that has that knowledge to access, is going to be a huge game changer for companies. Yeah.
Agree.
Any other questions, comments from anybody at this point? Okay. Not hearing anything else. I think we're at the end of our presentation. I appreciate you guys coming to give us some time and sharing your knowledge. Appreciate all of this. This is really good information and very applicable to a lot of industries.
Yeah, I will just thank three people again. Jason, Orion, thank you for inviting us. Thank you for giving us the time in the audience. And a shout out to Subbu again, who helped us get connected to this. So Subbu, if you're there, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for great comments and questions.
Yeah, and thank you, Subbu, because I think he was the one who connected with me, and then I was able to connect with both you guys. So definitely appreciate that opportunity.
No worries. Thank you. Shabala and Shubhada.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And I think, Orion, if you want to move on or transition, I don't know if all our speakers may not, or you could certainly stay on, but if you do not, we are transitioning into some section business.
Yeah, so you guys, again, thank you, and thank you for being flexible when my audio wasn't working earlier in the program. So your program was definitely insightful and most definitely engaging. So we really appreciate you sharing your expertise there. So we'll move into our section business. You're more than welcome to stay. It should be only a few additional slides. So we'll continue on here.
Ryan, you went on mute.
Mute. I pressed the space bar, trying to advance the slides. All right. Thank you, Jason. As far as upcoming ASQ events, we have the World Conference on Quality and Improvement that is taking place in Orlando, Florida. It's an in-person event. Registration is still ongoing, and that is happening from May 17th through the 20th. Here's our current section leadership team. This can be found on our Phoenix chapter page. So if you are a ASQ member, you can go to our section leadership page and you can click on the link here to the 2026 section leadership team if you'd like to contact any of the leadership members. So over the past, I think 3 or 4 months, we've been seeking out volunteers, and I just wanted to thank everyone that has stepped up. We've since filled all of our roles for volunteers, but that doesn't mean that if you're interested, you can't still volunteer. So we have opportunities for individuals to support committees now. So if you're interested in still volunteering, you can reach out to Sam or myself. Sam is our nominating chair, and his email is at the bottom of the screen here. And my email is also here at the bottom of the screen. And it's an opportunity to build some leadership experience, expand your professional network, and just give back to the overall quality profession. So if you have interest in volunteering, here's some of the positions that we have that you could support, whether it be the education chair or You can support the nominating chair or the program chair if you wanted to help Jason out by chance. We have, if any of these positions interest you, just reach out and we can have a conversation of how you can support. Again, this can be found on our leadership page. And this is the Phoenix section page. This is where most of you likely found our events and registered for tonight. So our future events will be loaded here on the Phoenix section page. I also try to post them on LinkedIn on our Phoenix ASQ LinkedIn page. And then also Jason will send you an RU certificate if you go and to our library and watch previous recordings. So we have Barbara, she manages this page for the most part. So thank you, Barbara. And we get everything loaded into our library. And if you go back and watch the videos where you weren't able to attend, we can get you an additional RU certificate as you get ready for your recertifications. And then also, now that we've onboarded all of our new positions and volunteers, we'll start sending out some additional newsletters. We should have some new handouts coming out as well. So, and then we have a job board here. It's updated routinely. We fell behind a little bit, but now that we have all of our positions filled, you should see that updated a little more frequently. So we've asked for some of your feedback, and some of the feedback that we've received was some improved member engagement and how we could improve our networking. So we're improving by in-person events. So some of the recommendations have been that we start doing some more formal events and networking. So I've reached out to a few individuals that said we could host in their organization. Still waiting to hear back from those individuals. But if your organization would be willing to host us here in the Valley to talk about quality and how you maintain your organization and your quality in your organization, excuse me, feel free to reach out to myself or Peter Nerman. He is our new arrangements chair, and we can help coordinate that. And then also, we've been discussing some informal networking events with our arrangements chair. So we're talking about maybe meeting up for some just coffee, doing a book exchange, things like that. So those are some future events you might see coming your way. And there might be some of you that are online that are not Phoenix section members or ASQ members, and you just joined because you saw the link. We encourage you to join the ASQ. And if you are a professional member, here are some of the benefits of becoming a professional member. Obviously, it's networking within the global organization. You can get certifications, and there's discounts when you become a member, a professional member on that training. And you get discounts on the conference certifications with your annual membership. And then all of that, the Phoenix section page, all of the access to all of that published content that I was discussing earlier is published there as well. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or Jerry. Jerry is our membership chair. All right. So after this meeting, Jason, who has coordinated this and this event with Barbara, Jason will send you an RU certificate for everyone. We have your emails from the registration. So if you didn't register with your email through the link, please send Jason and myself an email letting us know. And then we'll make sure you get your RU certificate. And then also included in that email will be a link to a survey. Please provide us any feedback that you have in that survey because we take that and every month the leadership team, we meet and we go over that feedback and we try to do our best to adjust our program in our Phoenix section to accommodate these programs and any other feedback that you have. So we look forward to your feedback, and we do our best to accommodate. And then coming up here in May, we have our next program. It's going to be by Gary Jing. It's a deficiency in existing RCA and FAMIA practice. That's still going on, correct, Jason?
It is. Sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah. No, you're good. All right, and then our forecasted tentative schedule here for the remainder of the year. Again, Jason and Barbara have done a great job. Jason seeks them out, and Barbara makes sure that they get online. I know I saw Marilyn online earlier, and John is one of our leadership members. So we've got them scheduled for presenters. So it's good to see not only the speakers supporting other speakers, but also joining in. So it's great to see you guys online. So I appreciate that. And if you're on social media, please follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn. I typically post a week out before the program starts. So if you're not an ASQ member, you can find us on LinkedIn. And if you like our programs, you can find our programs on LinkedIn is where I will typically post them. And this is our ASQ Phoenix link. We're also on YouTube and Instagram. So before we wrap up, are there any final thoughts or comments or questions that you might have? None seen, none heard. So thanks again for your attendance. Hopefully you join us next month. And again, please complete that email satisfaction survey. And Shalab, thank you again. And Shubhada, excellent presentation.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.